Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a really profound, honestly beautiful little fable called The Beauty of the Broken Stone. It's one of those stories that perfectly captures how we can actually take our deepest personal setbacks and, well, transform them into our greatest masterpieces.
So let me ask you something right off the bat. What do you do when your perfect plan just cracks? Seriously, think about a time in your own life when you waited and waited for the absolute perfect conditions to start something, maybe a project, a new career path, or even a relationship, only for things to just suddenly fracture right in front of you. Keep that specific memory in the back of your mind as we follow the journey of our protagonist today, a guy named Dev.
Okay, let's dive into part 1, the quest for perfection, and Dev's search for the ideal marble.
Picture this. Dev is a brilliant young sculptor living in a quiet town surrounded by hills. But like a lot of incredibly talented artists, Dev was, a bit stubborn. He had this one singular consuming dream. He wanted to create a generational masterpiece, something people would talk about for centuries. But in his mind, to do that, he absolutely needed the flawless, perfect starting material. And the build-up here was just massive. For years, he dreamed about it. For months, he hiked out to the stone quarry every single morning before sunrise, just obsessively searching for the perfect block. And finally, he actually found it, this enormous, gleaming, perfectly smooth piece of marble. He literally poured his entire life savings into buying it. For weeks, he's sketching, planning, hyping it up to everyone in town. The stakes are incredibly high. And then, day one arrives. He raises his hammer, takes a breath, and makes the very first strike of his chisel.
Which brings us to section 2, the unexpected flaw and the shattered dream.
Right on that very first strike, bam, a massive, deep crack just splinters right across the surface of this pristine, incredibly expensive marble. Dev was just absolutely devastated. Heart sunk into his stomach, devastated. The next day, he furiously marches back down to the quarry to complain that he was sold a damaged stone. But the quarry owner just looks at him and offers this really calm, profound response. He says, "Every stone has flaws. The question is whether you let the flaw define the sculpture." It's incredibly wise, right? But of course, Dev was just way too angry and heartbroken to actually hear it at the time.
So Dev goes back to his workshop, just completely defeated. And what happens next perfectly illustrates the ultimate paralysis of perfectionism. He just sat there, stared at that cracked marble for days without even touching it. Every time he looked at his tools, he'd just torture himself imagining the masterpiece he could have created if only he had that flawless stone. Weeks slipped by. The dust literally settled over his workshop, and his grand, generational dream remained completely trapped inside his own mind.
Moving right along to section 3, a shift in perspective and wisdom from an unexpected visitor.
So one afternoon, this elderly woman, who usually just passed by the workshop, decides to stop in. Dev, still wallowing a bit, complains to her about the cracked stone and how it ruined everything. But she just smiles gently and does something totally unexpected. She shares her own painful history. She tells him about losing her husband, her son moving far away, and eventually losing her entire business. It's this striking contrast. While Dev was sitting around waiting for a perfect stone, she was out there actively living with her cracks. She looks right at him and drops this absolute truth bomb. "If I had waited for a perfect life before living again, I would still be waiting."
Her words just kind of hung there in the quiet workshop long after she left. That night, Dev lights a small lamp. He walks over, stands in front of that damaged marble, and just gently traces the crack with his fingers. He notices, for the first time, how gracefully it actually curves from the corner right into the center. And suddenly, he asks himself this massive, paradigm-shifting question. Wait, what if the crack isn't a problem to hide? What if the crack is actually part of the design?
Let's look at section 4, embracing the crack and shaping the sculpture around the flaw. The very next morning, Dev is a completely different person. He walks in with this totally fresh outlook, grabs his chisel, and gets to work. He starts using this brilliant, actionable framework, which actually reminds me a lot of the beautiful Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold. First, he just accepts reality. He stops wishing for a different stone. Second, he really studies the unique nature of the crack. And third, he adapts. Day after day, working with incredible patience, he shapes his art around the flaw rather than fighting against it.
Months of grueling work go by, and we finally reach the breathtaking climax of the story. Dev unveils his finished piece right in the middle of the town square. And guys, it's a magnificent statue of a traveler carrying a lantern. But what about the crack?
Well, he had positioned the entire sculpture so that the crack ran directly through the center of the lantern, and he had painstakingly lined that crack with polished brass. During the day, it caught the bright sunlight, and at night, it practically radiated candlelight. It was stunning.
And that leads us to our final section, Part 5, the unforgettable story and when flaws become features.
The artwork was an absolute sensation. I mean, people were traveling from all the neighboring villages just to get a glimpse of this incredibly unique piece. Naturally, everyone's asking Dev, how did you manage to create something so incredibly original? His answer is just an absolute masterclass for any of us who have ever felt disqualified by our circumstances. He told them, I stopped asking for a perfect stone, and I started working with the one I had. The magic wasn't in finding a flaw-free starting point. It was in completely owning the reality he was handed. As the years went by, something really beautiful happened. Visitors completely stopped seeing the crack as a flaw. Instead, they remembered it as the very reason the sculpture shined in the first place. The perceived damage, the exact thing that almost completely ruined the project on day one, literally became its most defining, radiant feature.
So, what does this all mean for us? The moral here is absolutely crystal clear. Your setbacks, your failures, and yes, your scars do not disqualify you, not even a little bit. Just like Dev, you can still create something deeply meaningful. Often, the exact parts of your life you desperately wish were different, those end up becoming the very things that make your story completely unforgettable.
Which leaves us with one final lingering thought to reflect on today. What could you create if you stopped hiding your cracks? I really want to encourage you. Stop waiting for that perfectly smooth, flawless stone. It doesn't exist. Pick up your chisel, look at the messy, cracked reality you have right in front of you right now, and start creating. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I'll catch you next time.